time grief we go. Gotta learn to let it go. Once asleep, now awake, feeling every breath you take.
Welcome to Wake the F Up podcast, hosted by Alix and David Long, where we talk about living consciously and helping people uncover their essential selves so that they can stop sleepwalking through life. Our goal is to create a safe space where our guests can share how they've decided to wake the F up and become mindfulness experts through their own emotional healing journey. Welcome to Wake the F Up podcast. I'm your host, Alix Long, and of course I am here with my very handsome husband, Dr. David Long, and we are so happy to be back in the chair. It's been a minute since we've been able to podcast. I am feeling like a whole new woman with a much larger version of myself here. But Little Peanut is doing safe, and we're excited to be back. Why don't you give the doctor...
Where have we been?
We took a little siesta to take care of my health and well-being. So I think you guys may or may not have gotten the gist of this from, of course, Katie, and some of it from us throughout the different episodes. But at 18 weeks, I was diagnosed with Vasa Previa. It's a pretty rare predicament that can happen to women in pregnancy. I think 1 in 2,500 women have this. It's essentially a blood vessel, a fetal blood vessel that runs from the placenta across the cervical os. For those of you who don't know what that is, it's essentially the opening of your birth canal. That is actually not really quite dangerous until about 28 to 32 weeks when women start to have contractions. So you get diagnosed, and then you kind of just sit on this anxiety attack that anytime you have any major pelvic action. So no physical movements should be happening. You shouldn't be exercising. You shouldn't be having sex. You shouldn't be lifting anything. All these things that can put strain on your lower pelvic area and make you contract, put risk on the fetal vessel. And so when the fetal vessel would have pressure on it, it could rupture. And if it ruptured, dangerous for the mother, of course, but fatal to the baby. So that's how the baby gets her blood supply. So this big scare bomb came on us pretty mid-pregnancy, and we sat with it, kind of in denial, truthfully, thinking because the placenta and the uterus grows, a lot of times these will move upward and move out of the way, meaning the vessel would no longer be in the range of the birth canal. What can I say? This journey has been one I've kept a little more private. As everyone knows, David and I both have very public stories with our previous losses. And this one, for me, I needed to digest more quietly, and also learned a lot in the previous journey that in unknowns, for me, it was really important to be able to process and kind of digest myself and stay kind of close inside my family. And so we've talked a little bit about it, of course, but it got a little more severe the further along we got. So where am I? We had a lot of anxiety. Do you want to talk about maybe your thoughts as a physician? This is a relatively new diagnosis. Last, 5-6 years, they've had a name for it as ultrasound technology has gotten more and more incredible. They can see a lot more. And so this might be what a lot of people would have called caused stillbirths in the past, a lot of rupturing of blood vessels, or what they might have called placental ruptures in the past. So really scary deliveries and a lot of fetal demise in this scenario that was unknown by even obstetricians, up to 6-7 years ago. And it's actually still really relatively rogue in the sense that they're creating a standard of care, and that standard of care is not universally followed. Not all physicians know how to treat this. There's a lot of misinformation. That, of course, led right into I'll just speak for myself, a lot of anxiety. It definitely triggered me up and got me feeling a lot like stage 4 clinical trial level of cancer, where there's lots of options and lots of different opinions and lots of different thoughts. So we were super lucky to have an awesome, thorough team that led us to a lot of different specialists to help us understand what this is. And both of us avidly did our research, and yeah, we ended up landing into the, one may argue, best fetal surgeon in the world, who happens to be down the street from us in Houston, Texas. And Dr. Ramisha, I might be botching his first name, but Ramisha Papana. And man, all I can say is that he was a gift from heaven. So he is eradicating Vasa Previa. It's a really rare fetoscopic ablation that they're doing if you can fit into this small pocket of being a candidate, and we did. And so we chewed on that for a while because it had a lot of risks associated with the procedure. So fetal surgery, they essentially insert a laser inside of my amniotic sac and get down into the uterus and the placenta and ablate the extra little piece of placenta that was still attached to the baby. So there's a lot of risks involved, and it was a dangerous procedure, but they've had amazing success. And we weighed out that versus me going into the hospital for anywhere from 28 to 36 weeks. It would have been like a 4 to 5 week minimum stay in the hospital away from my family. And it brought up a lot for us. Given that we both lost our spouses. Both of us had to deal with medical trauma. I think anyone who's experienced a loss, there's really very few people out there that if you have a death to someone close to you, you probably have medical trauma to some degree. So this opened a lot of can of worms of some of the parts probably of my grief walk that I have not fully dealt with. And so on the other side of that, we had the procedure, and it was a little bit harder to bounce back than I anticipated, but it was incredible. And I am currently, this is like miraculous, Vasa Previa free. So we ablated the vessel, and now I can proceed on like a normal, non-high risk person. I'm still chewing on that and absorbing that, but it's getting better every day. How about you? I'm sorry, that's a lot of talking on my end.
No, it's okay. Yeah, it was a lot. I just realized while you were talking about it that one of the, some procedures that you do in medicine that go well, they sound routine. You know what I mean? Yeah, we went in for this, we got the procedure done, it was successful, and now we're home and we're fine. And that I remember I've done dictations like that before. You know, you're like, well, this...
On your side.
Yeah, where like your dictation is this long, but the procedure was like 8 hours long, and it was super risky, and you got it done, but it was really difficult, and all you get to say is, everything was great.
Right.
And that doesn't really encompass, at least what I was feeling, while you were having the procedure before, during, or after.
Yeah, Dr. Papana would say, we went in for fetoscopic ablation.
Right, we got the
ablation. The vessel was very vascular.
Right.
We moved slowly.
Yeah, what they do is
remarkable.
I really didn't know anything about it, so my medical background didn't help, other than just to understand the physiology of what they were doing. He was very good at explaining and allaying fears, and I felt very good about the way he, and this is definitely a goal for myself all the time, is to, you create a team approach with the patient, you know? So you're not doing this to the patient, you're not telling them what to do, you're explaining to them what's going on with their own body, and you're running through the options and making a decision together, which is a very powerful, good feeling. It felt really good to have that kind of relationship. And he said, I don't know, several times, which is a great thing, too. I mean, I liked him. I trusted him.
Yeah, me too.
But it was, as far as just the trauma, it dug up a lot of, a lot of out of controlness, a lot of fight or flight feelings. a lot of spiraling I did in the waiting room.
Yeah.
I oscillated between losing everything and losing nothing, you know. It was hard. It was really hard. And I was alone in the waiting room, literally alone. There was not even other family there.
Yeah.
Ours or otherwise. There was nobody there. And it was very lonely. And it took longer. He said 30 minutes to an hour, which it did. It took a little bit more than an hour and a half. But I had long enough periods of nothingness to really think that, you weren't coming out. And that was not a good feeling.
Yeah.
So, there was a lot of heavy breathing, and my body was very tight. Like, my shoulders were hurting. My back was killing me. I was exhausted, and then I would go into just full distraction, the phone, internet, whatever. And then your mind is kind of out of it for a minute, and then it'd come back in. It was hard. It was really, really hard. And then when you came out, you were in a lot of pain, which was very hard to see you hurting. And I could tell you were scared, which Alix is very strong and very... I wouldn't describe her as stoic, but she's capable, and to see her in pain was really bad. And there's nothing I could do. There's nothing I could do but just hold you. And I literally wanted to get into your recovery bed with you.
You did.
I had a really strong desire to get in the bed with you, even though there were like 4 people and monitors and all this kind of shit. And I just really wanted to get in the bed with you and feel you next to me and know that, or convey to you physically that I trusted that you were going to be okay.
Yeah.
I don't know. And then you throw the baby in there, right?
Right.
Which is right. It's not just us. So it's like this baby we made consciously, and was a very cautious and thought out decision, but one that we made just out of pure love. And I say cautious. I mean, it was not.
Well, cautious is thoughtful.
Thoughtful,
Very thoughtful.
Yeah. I didn't really.
Put a lot of thought into.
Yeah.
Choosing this baby, as you might reference back to why it was so difficult to choose to have another baby. At least, for both of us. I mean, actually, for me, really, it was more difficult for me. I wanted to make sure that I was going to be able to be the kind of mother and be able to be still present to all of our children who are needing so much.
But if we were going to talk about the hospital part, it wasn't near as bad as I thought it was going to be. And my preemptive thoughts of how bad it was going to be in the hospital was way worse than it was. I guess it's just where I worked every day for 20 plus years. It didn't really trigger me too much.
I think I had the very opposite experience. But so, the procedure as a patient was eye-opening. I take for granted I am really healthy. I never think about that, but I am literally really healthy, and I am so grateful for that. I work out all the time. I love Pilates. Mindfulness and moving my body is like the way that I have learned to handle stress since before cancer came, but especially since cancer came into my life and chaos and disarray. Being on bed rest and pelvic rest has really taken that from me, and that has made me realize how much anxiety gets wrapped up inside of my body when I am not able to move. And I am very healthy. So when we talk about surgeries or procedures or even like medicine, even a stomach ache, like I really don't like I don't like being sick. And I think, I can attribute that to a lot of different things. But especially watching Carl have his entire life deteriorated via cancer. And it happened like a thing at a time. But we got into the hospital. I knew it was going to be a lot. In fact, I mentally prepared. I saw my trauma therapist multiple times in prep. Dion Eleanor, who is running the retreat for us because we will have a brand new baby, who's my shaman. I go to her every week. We did hypnotherapy on it. I mentally prepared and had to release all of the hospital trauma. So for those of you out there who may have experienced a loss dealing with a chronic illness, I was in the hospital setting for 5+ years. Towards the middle and end, and even the beginning, because it came on fast and hard, we would sometimes be in the emergency room weekly. Hospital stays were a big part of our journey. And if we weren't in the hospital, we were in chemotherapy. There was always bells and whistles and, tubes and drains and all things medical, which I previously worked in the medical industry, so super comfortable with that from the working side of it. Very much was even comfortable being the wife of someone who was in it until it got to a severity, which our cancer started off very severe from the get-go and massive surgery within 2 months. All of that trauma does something to you. It stays inside of you. And I didn't quite recognize how much of that dysregulates me. I've had to be back in the hospital after Carl's dad died, and that was really hard. I kind of knew I was going to have a hard time. So I did all the things I could to prepare for it, and I actually think it did help me a lot. I really did. I mean, Dion, the clearing that we did and the hypnotherapy, we got to the root of what parts of the hospital trauma with Carl were the worst. It's a lack of control. It's watching someone you love have things ripped from them. He had a 16-hour esophagectomy and gastrectomy. And when he woke up, he was tied down because they didn't want him to remove his intubation tube. And they prepare you for surgery as much as they can, but they can't prepare you for everything. So sometimes in the medical world, it's easy to forget to tell the patient, yeah, you'll be intubated, you'll be intubated, you'll be intubated. I mean, we say these words, but a patient who's Carl never had the flu when I met him, pretty healthy in terms of hospital stays or that kind of doctor appointment kind of things. When he woke up intubated, the cuff on the intubation tube was not locked because his suture, what they call the anastomosis, where they created a new stomach and a new esophagus pulled down and put together, locking that could put pressure on that suture line. And I recognize that one of the biggest traumas that I have not dealt with or did not deal with until recently, and maybe it was in my head and my heart, was that, when he woke up, it was a lot of people die on that surgery. It's an extremely long and laborious surgery. A lot of people, they go in and there's cancer everywhere. And then they just pull out and come out and tell you, sorry, there's nothing we can do. You've got months to live. We had a 12-month-old, so a 1-year-old that just turned 1, and a 3-year-old who just turned 3. And he was 2. He didn't turn 3 until that August. We had the surgery in July. I just sat there for hours, what David was doing and panicking. And then when he came out of the surgery, he was what he felt like, and probably could have potentially been, what felt like he was choking on the intubation tube. And so blood pressure was rising, things were getting a little crazy. His anxiety was out of control. He actually could breathe on the monitor. You could see that his O2 sats weren't tanking, but his blood pressure was going through the roof to a dangerous level. And so I convinced the team to let him have a handout to write me a message, and he wrote on a dry erase board, "Why are you letting them kill me?" And that was the first words he said to me on a dry erase board after 18 hours of him being in one of the most dangerous surgeries in the world. And something about that I just had to put away because we had 3 weeks of ICU and drains and tubes, and there's always risk of lungs collapsing after esophagectomy and gastrectomy. I was in hives from head to toe. My kids were away for a month. I mean, just so many things to manage just one human. And that was to save his life. But in the process of you are trying to keep someone alive, and that's what stage 4 cancer feels like. It is dying, trying to live, while being almost killed to try to live. Something in that process made me realize that, like, a lack of control, right? Like, a lack of control. You could have all the best wishes for your loved one and do all the right things, but their lack of control and your lack of control was spinning my world out of control. And I didn't feel that way this time, but I was definitely afraid. And I will say that I got into the operating table. This is the first time I've ever been awake on an operating table. This is the second surgery I've had in my entire life. And I had 2 normal deliveries before that. Other than that, I've had no medical issues, thankfully. And I was strapped down. That's just a safety thing. And it was lightly strapped. I was awake oriented. There was probably 30 physicians in the room. It's a world-renowned doctor, and he had a team ready to go. So if we had to have an emergency C-section, if the baby needed blood transfusion, 5 anesthesiologists and teams under them, lots of students. He had multiple assists with him, and I was butt naked, 45-degree angle, Chindellenberg, and covered in certain spots on my chest or whatever. And I was prepared because they let me actually know they were amazing. This was an amazing team. They were very good about preparing you mentally. I did not know that in the emergency I might be intubated. When they said put you to sleep, I kind of was like, I don't know. I'm naive as it was. I definitely didn't think they intubated if we had to do an emergency C-section. I've never had a C-section. So many things were out of my control. And in it, I could feel, normal pressure. But more than that, the empathic nature of who I am, and like a lot of my survival skills that I grew up with that I try not to always like access, but I just, they are who I am. They helped me as a child to know what was happening in a room, and so I can read people. I could feel the anxiety in the room that the surgery was longer. Dr. Papana was a complete professional, and I knew that it must have been more vascular than they thought and bigger than they thought, and it took longer. And that made me scared. I kept thinking, like, something was wrong with the baby. Is something wrong? And it was just, David couldn't be in the room, because naturally I think it's, probably for everyone's sanity and health that your loved one doesn't see you in that condition. So I was very alone, and I just kept oscillating my head between, like, I have to stay calm so that the baby stays calm, worrying that the doctor was going to pull out of the procedure and tell me, like, it's not going to work. And then I would have to go straight to the hospital for 4 or 5 weeks after already being in pain and going through all this. I kept thinking about David in the waiting room. I knew that would be hard for him. And then I kept thinking about Carl, tied down, scared, all the procedures he went through, all the stuff that we experienced. And I just kept thinking about the baby, and I was just thinking about, she had this little little ultrasound picture a few weeks prior to this of her smiling in my belly, and literally, like, they have her capture just this huge smile on her face. And I just kept thinking, like, isn't this just life? Like, she's sitting in here, this beautiful smile, happy, floating around, has no idea, because she is 100% healthy. There's no risks to her other than the delivery itself. I've gotten a lot of weird questions like, oh, is the baby going to be okay? She's going to be like, no, she has no physical deformities. There's no problems with the baby. She's perfectly happy, and she has no idea what's happening, that this scary-ass blood vessel is just down there looming. And I just thought, that's life, right? Like, you have these moments or I guess if you're in a grief path or a cancer path or a death path where everything's fine and you're walking around thinking everything's fine, and then, danger potentially is, like, right around the corner. And I felt kind of the fragility of that, in the sense that, like, she is fine, but I'm making a decision right now that could literally, like, put us in the NICU for multiple weeks, harm my husband, harm my baby, harm my children who have been through so much, and this is, like, exactly the reason I was scared to get pregnant. And it's kind of weird. And I thought to myself, like, a lot before going into the procedure and even, like, leading up to it, and a lot of the grief that work that I did with my therapists and my therapy team was, like, sort of the same vibe you have as a widow or a person who's had loss. Like, why me? Why is this happening to us?
I was just thinking, I think before I probably would have cushioned myself pretty thoroughly with, bad things don't happen to me, that's an ineffectual coping strategy anymore. Yeah. And I kept thinking, in fact, that did creep into my mind. I was like, well,
no way will this happen.
Right. And then I immediately would think, no, that's not
be naive.
That's not the life that we have. That's not life. That's not real.
Yeah.
You really have to, when you're raw.
Well, you can't. So one of the things that was the hardest part was, like, in the past, I love that you say I'm, like, can handle anything. So people always tell me how brave I am. I am not brave. I'm not any more brave than anyone else in the world. I, hilariously enough, have had this realization, especially lately, that maybe the universe, maybe some part of me is meant to be on this planet close to and in dealing with death, grief, loss, and hardship. I don't know why, but it's like it's been around me since I was very little. And I'm super grateful that didn't happen here. But again, it came close to me. Like, my baby could die. And what would that mean for me? But I'm not braver than anyone else. I have things sometimes that are heavy that are handed to me or surround my life. And when you're in a hardship, when you look at someone who's like, oh, she's so brave, she just lost her husband and she continues to walk, or David, you're so brave, I don't know how you got through what you do. Well, we chose not to die or kill ourselves.
Yeah, I think
we just had to keep walking.
Yeah, that's
what bravery is.
That's more of a reflection of the person saying it than the person that they're talking about.
They're astonished.
What they're saying is they can't imagine surviving that. The truth is they can and they would, but
when I was scared.
Because before, I thought the same thing. Like, I would see tragic things happen to people, and I'd be like, wow, I can't believe they survived that. Or they
I would have just died if that happened to me.
Right.
People say that to me all the time.
Right.
And the truth is, like, you won't die. You'll keep walking because you have to. I mean, you maybe could choose to stay stuck, like we've talked about in the How to Heal from Grief. Like, you may choose to not feel it. You may choose to close down. What's hard is with all the somatic work we've done.
There's nothing wrong with that. So this is something else I've learned, that
staying stuck.
No, there is some utility sometimes to controlling the spigot.
Of course.
And it is true, particularly like
this was a survival skill time. Is that what you mean?
Exactly. Mm-hmm. There are times where, and my therapist tells me this all the time. She's like, I talk about the hospital trauma and patients that have died in my hands and all that kind of terrible stuff, and how closed off I was at the time. I really didn't feel a whole lot. I mean, I felt some, but I would go home and not feel anything. And she was like, well, you know what? You got through it. You did exactly what you had to do to be able to take care of those patients and people. You shouldn't feel bad about not feeling it. Had you really felt it, you might not have been able to make the decision that you needed to make for the best possible outcome. So there is some utility, I think, to sometimes shoving it down, as long as you realize that is not a long-term coping strategy. It's a short-term fix for something you're going to have to deal with later. And then you can let it out in kind of a modulated way with professional help, and it's not as destructive. But now, I'm not suggesting shoving down. I'm just...
Really accurate. I mean, yeah. I felt I could not stop myself from feeling fear. I could not stop crying before the surgery. I mean, David was like getting nervous. He was like, I'm going to need you to toughen up a little bit. And he meant it in the right way. Like, I can't. There was a point where I have untangled and stopped working from those coping strategies of me being stoic and pushing it down and people pleasing. And like, I in the past would have been like firm and ready to go and okay for the nurses. You know what I mean? Like random people that would like, or for our family. And like the truth is, this time with our family, like I could not include anyone hardly because I was like, I can't manage other people's thoughts on this. I know myself. I also don't want to defend it. It's a very understood, even by the patients and physicians, even by the maternal fetal medicine doctors. So those are the high risk doctors. They don't even really know totally what to do with this. Okay, so until I got into literally the number one doctor in the world who deals with this and created this procedure and has been studying Vasa Previa for a long time, he's creating standard of care. Like, he was the first person that really told me what this looks like as universally.
Yeah, I actually really appreciated that because
this is scarier than you think.
I think because I responded pretty negatively when they first told us. And I wasn't there, but when it first was presented to me, it was presented as kind of a non-option, and that, oh no, you've got to come in at 28 weeks, and we're going to watch you until 36 weeks. And I was like, hold on, we're going to have a discussion about why that makes sense or doesn't make sense. You know what I mean? I felt like I was not participating in the beginning, which really triggered me for sure.
Oh, yeah.
But with the fetal surgeon, I felt like we were. First of all, it made sense.
Well, he actually told you, like, when I was at Yale, we put people in the hospital at 25 weeks for observation because he was saying that, even for those of you listening, there might be a rare subset that may have this or heard of someone who had this. It's called Vasa Previa. The standard of care at this point, which is really all over the place, okay? So, and people get really nilly-willy because it's really challenging to put your patient into a hospital, and hospitals don't even want to have patients that are kind of pretty healthy other than this, right?
You're just sitting there.
The dangerous thing is you're sitting there waiting to have a contraction so that you can be in an emergency room and get a C-section in 5 seconds. So what they look for in the bi-weekly to weekly monitoring they're doing is for you, if it moves 2.5 centimeters away from your cervical os, aka what becomes your birth canal, the birth opening, your Vasa Previa free. And he was like, no, the minimum, I'm working very hard right now across the globe to get 5 centimeters minimum because you dilate to get the baby out of you 10 centimeters, right? And so even if you have a C-section, if you don't get into there within 3 minutes, your baby is at risk of dying. This is a lot of technical stuff, but if you want, I'll put some show notes in for Dr. Papana. This is at Memorial Hermann in Houston at University of Texas. It was an amazing experience all the way around in terms of care. My personal trauma and my dealing with the medical was really just about us, honestly. We had excellent care from top to bottom. I've never had a quicker discharge in a hospital in my entire existence. It was lovely.
Yeah, and people out there may wonder, like, why did we choose this therapy? And for me, it was twofold. Number one, we didn't want to be in the hospital for 8 to 10 weeks. That's just, or 12 weeks, 8 to 12 weeks. So that seemed really bad. I mean, survivable, but really bad. And then the second thing was...
you're still at risk. Correct.
So there's, if you're curious about it, and I'm super curious about this part of medicine, is kind of it's the over observation medicine, or over measured medicine, if you will. And it's not just medicine, it's a lot of things. Like, engineers can over measure to the point where they can't make a fucking bolt that works, you know what I mean? Because they measure it so many times and they forget that actually we're just making a bolt, And there's a lot of that in medicine where there's a lot of over surveillance, and it generally, and it's interestingly, it's been studied. So people have done these beautiful studies of what over surveillance does, and it's over surveillance ubiquitously leads to unneeded procedures and deaths. And there's a good study that was out there that looked at like 250 patients with this problem, and they compared, given that the standard of care without the ablation is observation, they compared in-hospital observation versus at home close-up, regular checkups, basically. And the study showed that in-hospital observation led to worse outcomes secondary to prematurity because you're monitoring the baby and the mom all the time, and normal contractions or even mild contractions that are not a big deal, straight to C-section because everybody's freaking out. Whereas at home, you're more likely to be like, little contraction, it went away, and not worry about it. So I'm reading this going, I don't want to be in the hospital monitored 24/7, labs drawn every day, checked every 2 hours. I think that's generally not a great
no one
idea.
wants to do that.
Right. That's
But
just
at the same time, I will say I've joined a Vasa Previa support group. I wanted to see what was going on out there on the ground. One thing I've always learned, and if you're in a medical crisis kind of scenario or you're in a long-term caregiving role, never underestimate the power of a support group. Let me let you know, you can find some of the most amazing information because people just like me, will jump in there after they've had a success or learn something that was like totally dangerous, and you get some really, vital information.
yeah. And this,
These people,
a lot of physicians feel threatened by the internet and these kind of things. I think
amazing.
they're wonderful. I would rather have a well misinformed patient come in than a completely uninformed patient. I mean,
this group was not uninformed, but it's just crazy to read that the standard of care is so deviated. But I would say that, if you are out there and you just got diagnosed, I'm going to say for David, as a physician, saying he's right. Over monitoring might have the baby be born earlier and cause more issues in the NICU, a longer stay in the NICU. The NICU is actually really amazing. They're doing amazing things. I was reading the other day that 22 weekers can be born and brought to full term. That's not to say, but I want to say that is less risky than trying to stay at home. That's actually and Dr. Papone was like, that is the scariest.
The other problem is, and this comes up all the time, when you have a rare condition, it's difficult or impossible to study. There's no reasonable way to get good data because it's rare, and it's extremely difficult to attain a standard of care.
Right.
Because it just doesn't happen very often. So usually physicians and hospitals and everybody tend to be overcautious. And, if you need to come in at 32, they say, well, we don't really know, so let's make it 28. And, well, we don't really know it's 28, so maybe we should just do 26. And then it's hard to put there's no standard, which makes it kind of out of the map. But now on the flip side of that is a situation that leads to innovation, really, because it's a problem, right? You're admitting 2 to 3 to 4 to 5,000 women a year for 8 to 15 weeks. And people like Dr. Papana see that as is there some way we can solve this problem? And I think that's the beauty of it. That's a wonderful. He was wonderful, and the procedure was really. It's amazing. It's amazing what they can do.
When it was all said and done, I had done significant research on him, and I had left. The scariest part was at the end of the surgery, I actually thought I was going into labor. I went into excruciating pain, and
I mean the uterus not.
It took me a minute.
The uterus doesn't really like having a hole poked in it.
It's very angry with me right now. I'm like, I literally thought I was going into labor. When I saw David after the procedure, I just wanted to sob, because I just knew I just needed to hold you. I was like, oh my God, that he got the the vessel that we most likely, even if we had a baby in the next 24 to 48 hours, that the baby would be safe. It was an odd mix of scary and relief all at the same time, which I think all risky kind of procedures of this nature. I think maybe patient 160, so 160 surgeries, and this is a world-renowned doctor who does other fetal surgeries like spina bifida. I mean, he's a lead on a lot of very, very high level surgeries.
I love to see from a trauma point of view, I love to see medicine accommodate anxiety, right? So he gave us this pamphlet which told you about, well, it was like a sheet, like a little informational sheet. And it gave you why do this, why consider this procedure. And it was, minimally invasive and 24-hour stay and all the medical, physical things. And the last one was, alleviation of delivery and pregnancy anxiety. And I was like, well, that should be number one. But at least it was on the list. I mean, 10 years ago, that wouldn't even been on the list. If you didn't have an anatomical or an absolute medical reason to do something, it was not okay. So I love to see that change, that dealing with trauma before it happens is a reason to intervene.
Well,
And that's
not just that.
that's a big change.
Very supportive
Yeah.
of women who really wanted vaginal deliveries.
Right.
I thought that was, and I mean, we are talking one of the best fetal surgeons in the country, and every one of the physicians in the group. So I at one point was having like an ultrasound that was very invasive done, and there was 7 fetal surgeons in the room mapping out what they were going to do for the surgery, and all of them had one child or more, so they were all married with kids, and all of their wives, none of them had C-sections. And I was totally shocked by that. I was totally shocked by the fact that they are dealing with the scariest and worst case scenarios in pregnancy, and they want their spouses, which is a very big shift from, I think, the way I was raised, and just the way medicine was going. And I thought it was really cool. Just that's a shout out a little bit to women. Who knows? I think people are.
Yeah, I would love to see patients and people demand more anxiolysis. And, unfortunate.
Ways, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, we've had like this issue comes up not uncommonly, like breast lesions.
Right.
It's a big hot topic.
Necessary surgeries.
Right. So we see a lot of lesions that are probably benign.
Like instead of waiting and watching.
Exactly. And then you can send the woman home and say, hey, there's only a 5% chance it's breast cancer. Come back in 6 months. Or we can just do a little minimally invasive biopsy and you're done. And actually, I think that's, even though it's probably benign, I think that lysis or that alleviation of anxiety it's hard to fathom. Yeah, I mean, imagine thinking that you might have cancer in your body for 6 months. Yeah, I mean, it's ridiculous, actually. It's an absurd suggestion. And imagine 6 months of trauma is really what it is, of unknown. And no one's talking about it.
Well, and so today, obviously, that was really needed to be aired. We have had a lot going on. But we're talking about medical trauma because it's inevitable if you're in grief or suffering or have had a loss of any sort in terms of death, which is, our expertise. You are going to run into the hospital, whether you're just the end of the person you just lost happens there, or you have a long journey in the hospital in and out. You are not going to avoid the hospital. Most likely you'll be there at some point in the grief cycle journey. So, yeah, and then I was thinking too, like, how weird is it that you can have this, well, for us, young loss with hospital woven throughout the journeys in some form or fashion, and then you choose life again and choose love again, and like literally this baby represents us choosing our love and to live. And that we are not going to let death define us. It will be woven within us. But this child is literally the choice and the representation of us choosing each other and love and letting love win. And the fact that we had death woven in is just life. Because, you can be the sideliner that says, I don't know how you're that brave. And that's a normal response for those who are in the support, care, friendship kind of role. Or you can be a person that listens to this podcast, or a friend who's watched a friend go through hell and loss, and say to yourself, not one single person in this world is getting out of death. Not one single one of us will make it through life without holding the hand of death, personally and with your loved ones. So the sooner you get comfortable with the stuff that we're talking about on this podcast and that we're doing in this organization, the better off you're going to be, because you will face death and you will have to deal with it. And you can't escape it, even when you're choosing love, right? Like just because we chose all this happiness and we're actively participating in a new version of our life now, doesn't escape us from more loss.
No.
And we have, a lot of life ahead of us. And that's the human existence, the human journey. So medical trauma will be a part of that journey for all of us. And there's a few tips I would say that I can give you if you are in a medical crisis or a journey. We talk a lot about surrendering the last few episodes that we've been on, because at a certain point, I am a avid researcher, and I do believe that you should never go into any hospital scenario without battling and arming yourself with every goddamn piece of research you can get your hands on. You do not want to be uninformed in a hospital and at the liberty of everyone else telling you what to do. You have to pick experts that you trust, and you have to feel really secure about your decisions, but you better inform yourself about what's happening if you're in a surgical procedure, if you're in a caregiving role. If you want to protect your life, you need to take care of it. And being naive and just thinking someone with an MD or some kind of practitioner, and I respect so much the medical community, but it is your job to take care of yourself. And so get informed, ask questions, find support, look around, find a support group, figure out what other people are doing, research. And then when you get in there, you gotta...
Well, that's the thing. I was going to say, even if you lack the research, so maybe it's an emergency, you don't have time to, research.
True.
I have preached this for a long time. If it doesn't make sense, keep asking till it makes sense. And I've heard this over and over again, and a certain group of professionals like to use this as a means to win court cases, and that it's the concept that that you can't understand. Well, it's too complicated. You went to school for 14 years. You can't expect them to understand, and that is just ridiculous.
Take a pause. You can take a pause if it's not an emergency.
Yeah.
And even if it is an emergency.
It needs to make sense. If they can't explain it to you in a way that makes sense to you, they need to keep explaining to you until it does. 99% of what we do is very, very simple. And you don't really need to know anything about potassium levels or, autoimmune diseases to understand simple concepts. And the therapies associated with those problems. Yeah. And if anybody, I know when I talk to dentists, doctors, or whatever, if they tell me something that doesn't make sense, it's a huge red flag. You're like, wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense. Can you explain that again? And if they can't explain to you where it makes sense, then alarm bells should be going off. Mm-hmm. Because they need to be able to explain what they're doing all the time in a meaningful, simple way. In fact, that's the law. That's part of informed consent. Is it has to be told in a way that the person you're talking to can understand.
Yeah.
I consent people daily that now I have translators, but I consent people whose primary language is not English all the time, and we just sit there until they get it. And when the translation's done, they understand, I understand, they understand, and then we've established a joint relationship where we're making decisions, and that's the appropriate way to do it. That doesn't always happen, unfortunately. I think some people just don't want to do it. It's a waste of time, or unfortunately, they don't know what they're doing.
Well, and if you don't feel you're participating with your physicians in your own healthcare, your practitioners, then you need to find a team that does support you.
That's right.
Especially if you're in a chronic illness. I learned hindsight when we were first diagnosed with cancer, and I was so lucky we had a great team, but you need to get to chemotherapy, you need to get to surgery, like immediately we got to get this out. And then you're like, oh, we're going to start chemotherapy tonight, tomorrow. And I think we had a port in next day. We were chemo in 3 days. And, once you make a care plan, if you're new to being a cancer diagnosis, and I'm not sure if all chronic disease works this way or this is unique to cancer, once you start a therapy, you have to complete the therapy before another physician will transition you. And that can get a little tricky. So just take your time, take a breath. You got a week. It's been sitting in there. I mean, you don't want to wait forever, but I would say, if you're not sure, do some research. But really more than these, of course, we're getting into nitty gritty of medicine, but because you can't go through medical trauma without it. But I would say also that the tips that I would use is breath work over and over and over and over.
I was breathing. I breathed a lot in the recovery room. I did these like 4 counts in, hold for 4, out for 4. You know, that very simple thing, and
Box breathing.
it immediately brings you out of wherever you are back into your body. And I felt the chair several times. I felt the wall a couple of times, and it really helped. Because I was really spiraling, because you can really go down into the rat hole, as you'd say, the rabbit hole of well, what if she doesn't make it out of this procedure? Or, what if she makes it out and the baby doesn't make it out? Or what if the baby doesn't make it out and she makes it out? And then you just go down this hole, and then before you know, you're selling your house and you're and you're making these life changes in your head that it's not helpful, and it kind of hurts your body when it happens,
Well, and I would say that there's no way to go through medical trauma as a caregiver. It is a really helpless place to be. As the patient, gotta help your, at least you're sedated to the point where you don't have to know what's going on. I was not that fortunate this time, which was really hard. I had to fight my head. So one of the things I would say is the reason that we practice somatics so heavily in this organization is somatics gets you out of your mind, which is meant to keep you in a survival skill, right? And we've talked about that. Survival skills actually are needed for this kind of a situation that we've been in. And so dissociating is when you have overthought so much that your body's like, anxiety's high, we're having a panic attack, we're right there, we're in shutdown, we're hitting the far end of the spectrum of whatever, sympathetic response or, the freeze response is going to hit you to where you're collapsing or you're having a panic attack. Those are the too far end of the bad spectrums. Sometimes needed, right? They still are keeping you in survival. And so you go out of your body, out, way away. And that's your body's way of calming down the system and trying to get back to some sort of normal. So if you feel yourself I was not freezing, I was 100% in a panic attack mode. Mm-hmm. And I will never probably not credit this beautiful, I was a nursing student. She was an anesthesia nursing student, and she literally was rubbing my hair. She was rubbing my head. And literally so close, holding both my hands. I think I ripped her hand off for 2 hours. And she was telling me little updates. The baby's doing great. She was looking at the fetal monitor. She was looking at the ultrasound. They were doing belly sonography inside my body with more sonography. And I'm crying on and off, just scared. But I stayed in the moment because I would go down to basic things, just like you're doing breath. I would go back to my breathing and just focus on breathing. I would think about David and I on our honeymoon. I thought about you a lot. I thought about our happy place, which is always water oriented, and just that we would be okay no matter what is what I kept coming back to. So visualizations are really good if you need to get out of your thoughts, because my thoughts kept being it's not going well. The baby's not going to. Is the baby okay? They're putting in too much fluid inside my belly. I could feel myself contracting. I was I'm going to have the baby. Oh my God, we're going to be an emergency C-section. And then they're going to intubate me. And then I strap down and just all the PTSD. And then I would go back to her, simply touching and rubbing my head and holding my hand. And I would feel her hand. I'd feel my hand. I'd feel her hand in my head. And then I'd go back to my breath. And then when I got myself out of the crazy, then I would do a visualization of David and I that just deeply in love and at peace, and thinking about my kids and us just okay, everybody's okay, that we've been through hell, but even after hell we are okay. We will get to okay. And so if you're a caregiver, if you're a patient, that's you can go into just feel something, breathe, visualize a positive thing or something that's your peace state. Same in the hospital, waiting room, right? Box breathe in for 4, hold for 4, out for 4, hold for 4. That's a vagal nerve reset, okay? That automatically brings you down from sympathetic response, aka anxiety. And then you can do visualizations of I see myself in a happy space. I'm in the water. You go to your place. What is the place that brings you peace? Or maybe, for me, if you've got a loved one who's on the other side in hell and you're far away and you can't be there, imagining us okay, imagining us safe. Like, safety was what I was craving. And I did not, I mean, I felt safe in my surgeon's hands. I felt safe. I knew I was in the best hands in the world. But I didn't necessarily feel safe in my body. Like, I was like, is my body going to perform?
Yeah.
And that was scary. And so I just created visualizations of safety, which is always you. And yeah, these things can be really heavy, and they can draw you right back into your old stories and your old life. And, you know, even after we've come out of this, like, I have been very introverted the last few weeks. I have been very cautious with my energy. I couldn't talk on the phone. I needed to just feel, because I knew one of the things that I've learned is if I didn't process this in the processing time, I was going to shove it down and push it away like I did the last time. And I knew that would come back. And I never
You knew then?
I knew now, like this last few
You
weeks.
didn't know then?
I didn't know then. Like, I didn't know then that I would be thinking about Carl tied down and that. Yeah. Like, when I did the hypnosis, which I was completely, like, in kind of an out-of-body state. Like, you're still conscious, but, like, these memories were coming up, and I was like, I didn't think that would be the memory of all the things. There were so many traumatic moments, but yeah, there was something about, like, if I'm honest, I was deeply, I felt deeply abandoned. That's a crazy thing to say out loud, because, you know, remember, as a caregiver, unfortunately or fortunately, you still have emotions and still long to be seen, cared for, and loved. And when you're giving out, like, you think your person's going to die. When they wake up screaming at you and mad at you for not doing enough when you literally are in hell. Like, I was fighting, like, not fighting, but, like, kind of like fighting to get him what he needed before he even, like, was conscious. I felt now what I would know is abandoned. I felt like, how could you be mad at me? Like, you could have just died on the table. Like, we should be hugging and, like, thankful that you're alive and made it through this procedure. And, you know, like, of course I forgive him for his responses, which were, he was in excruciating pain and lots of stuff, but we just can't forget sometimes that, like, I'm sure you feel the same way about, like, watching Betsy die. It's like, you can be like, how could this be happening to them? And, like, feel all this sadness and love and, like, but still upset and angry. I mean, we had a glimmer of your anger pop out on our last episode, obviously.
What are you talking about?
But that's raw and that's real. And you know, I've been trying to get more.
No, I think death is abandonment to the survivors. Mm-hmm. For sure. I thought that when she was dying. I thought, don't leave me. How can you leave me?
Yeah.
It's a weird kind of deal, but...
No, it's not weird at all. That's exactly what death is. Them leaving you. So, you know, we have to, in this show, I think, be really real. And I realized, like, I had to go inside the last few weeks, and even our loved ones who mean well are just, like, the things that are coming out of people's mouth are making me laugh almost, because it's really reminiscent of being back in the widow state of early days where people say weird shit, where you're like, yeah. And you're just like, I knew everything would be fine. I just knew you'd be fine. And I'm like, I am fine, again, because I'm going to do the work to be at my best and to process. Being okay and being well is truly a state of the nervous system. It's returning back to a regulated state. You cannot return back to a regulated state unless you do work, unless you do things that build resiliency. It's not, doctor got the vessel, you're fine, and everything's okay. No, that's not how this works. Doctor got the vessel, I am actually fine, but emotionally speaking, I just walked through hell to be fine, and I'm going to have to process and take a minute with my body, which has been through a lot of different things.
I think a lot of people don't do that, actually. I think a lot of people don't do that.
I sure as hell didn't before.
Yeah.
But I now know that that is the PTSD, these little like spurts. It's like almost like I think it's like you're holding the hose, garden hose, and like like just like a little bit of that water like coming out the side.
Mm-hmm.
Like you can see someone whose unprocessed trauma is like water hosing out a little bit.
Definitely.
You're trying to block it, but it's like the pressure is building and building and building.
Definitely.
And like you don't have to live like that. Feeling it isn't going to kill you. I have to tell my clients that all the time. Like feeling won't kill you. It's actually going to help you. It's just hard. So I've been feeling. So I highly recommend that if you're going through some stuff at home. Feel. And that kind of leads us into a little bit of the closing that I wanted to talk about, which is, gosh, we're so close to upcoming retreat. We're like almost booked. We have a few more spots left, 3 spots left. 3 spots left. And we rent a whole, like it's like an entire resort essentially. So we have 3 rooms left. And in those 3 rooms, we can have up to 3 people which is plenty of space. They're big enough, but 2 is really comfortable. 1 is luxurious. So, technically up to 9 people could come still, down to 3.
Well,
so
not really 9 people.
Yeah, because 3 in each room. There's 3 rooms.
9 women. That's what she means.
9. Well, no, that's not true. We can have 9 men or women.
Oh, okay. I didn't know we were opening it to men.
It is open to men. Let me be clear.
Oh, wonderful.
It has always been open to men.
That's
we
great.
have we tend to gravitate women. I've had a lot of interest in men. Men often get very afraid to come to our retreats because it is a little bit more female dominated. That's just the nature of the sign up. But no, men can totally come.
It is definitely not just the nature of the sign up.
Okay.
It's not an accident. I mean, it's. I think it's rare for men to take the time to go to a retreat.
I do too, and
or to even feel the need for a retreat, even though they might need it. They don't.
Well, we did a retreat for your birthday, which I booked for him because he would never book one for himself. So again, this is often why
that's a perfect example.
We don't have as many men as I would love to have. As men, gosh, women struggle to sign up and feel that they can and should take time to do a retreat. And so, if you've been through some tough times or you're really struggling emotionally, to have space to process and integration of all what I'm talking about. So like what just happened to me, like this is a perfect time if I, wasn't popping a baby out and could actually travel. Like if you went through something that felt so heavy and didn't have time, right? Because work and like you're back on the hamster wheel.
No, I think
retreats are perfect for that.
I think retreats can be a good introduction, or it can be a good focused work on stuff you're already working on, or it can be, taking the work you're doing to a higher level. It can be a lot of different things to different people that show up.
When I think men are really afraid, and then they actually get even more afraid, I think probably.
Super afraid, right? So there's a really good chance if you're a man and you show up to a retreat that you're the only person there that's never done a lot of work. Everybody else there has probably done some therapy or some retreats or something.
You'd be surprised, actually, men, if you're listening and you're considering going on a retreat. I would say at least 50 to 75% of my women who come on the retreat have done no therapy. I always highly encourage doing a little bit of self-work because it can be challenging sometimes to go that, heavy into it.
It's super hard.
But DM us on any of our social pages if you have questions and you're out there, male, female, or any gender for that matter, and want to ask about a retreat. We're actually going to do a panel with Dion. Eleanor is going to be running the retreat. I will be, when we booked this, I was supposed to be like less than a month postnatal. I have no idea when I'm delivering this baby. It can be anywhere in the next 2 weeks to the next 8 weeks. We are just in a big question mark. And I thought after everything we have been through, potential NICU stay was early days. And so I planned and I am pumped. This is David and I go see.
She's amazing.
Dion. She is far more talented than I could ever be, and you guys are in amazing hands. And Callie is coming back to do, run the same format that we've been running with a little bit different.
I mean, I could go.
You could go. You could. And why don't you tell them? So I booked you a retreat with Dion in the same resort that we host our retreat on, which is just like a slice of heaven to me. I just don't think you can get. People are like, well, why can't you do more you know, in the United States because it's in Mexico. And we will, as we grow, it will be other practitioners. But for me, I can't, I don't know that I'll go other places at this time of my life. It's too, it's done well. It's done better than anywhere I've ever been.
It's very beautiful. And the only negative, and it's actually just part of the journey, is just the arrival.
Boat.
Yeah.
We had a little bit of a rough day at sea when we came in. It was
very rough. I think that's rare, but it was rough. But it kind of leads a little bit to the.
It's very retreaty. You get on go to Puerto Vallarta, and then you go down.
It's journey like, which is okay. I mean, that's okay.
We'll tell them about what it's like for you to be on a retreat.
Well, I mean, it wasn't exactly what it's going to be, in that it was a little less organized than what your retreat would be.
100%,
but it was good. It was beautiful. The food's excellent. The people that we interacted with were very nice. Deanna was amazing. It was overall just very relaxing and interspersed with some really painful deep diving. That's okay. It was good. Food was really good, actually. Surprisingly good. I was expecting kind of tasteless, vegan, raw vegetables. Mm-hmm. It's not that at all. It's very good.
Yeah, the food's beautiful.
Very tasty, fresh food. The desserts were amazing. It was great.
Yeah, so for David's birthday, we went, he turned 50, we went down, and I kind of created a retreat. So he's right. It was a little bit different than ours. So ours is at Mixto, which is the separate, sister resort, which is right next to the Shinalani side of, Shinalani is the main resort. And we stayed in Shinalani. My guests always stay in Mixto, which is even better because you have two private chefs, your own bartender, who makes whatever, kombuchas, and you can have an alcoholic beverage if you want one. You each have your own room, but it's all in its own encompassed area. You have your private beach. Everything's kind of right there for you. It's just amazing. So Quimixto is actually a little bit bigger, but there was other retreats going on when we went down. Mm-hmm. And so we did an immersion with Dion, and it was really cool. We did a lot of tantra work, which was mm-hmm. awesome. So a lot of what's building intimacy with both self and each other. It's a little bit misnomer that it's all sexual, and there's a reason that it has a connotation for that, because you do almost holding hands and sort of movements and breathing in synchronicity, which is really powerful and super connecting, and it's almost more intimate than sex itself. And then it can often obviously lead to sex because you're just wow, we are just literally on fire and connected, but we're not actually doing any sexual activity. It's just...
I would say it was a facilitated connection that I've never experienced anything like it before.
Yeah, it's kind of what women always desire. It's intimacy without sexual activity. It's this depth of almost you're bearing your heart and I'm bearing my heart, and we're in this almost verging uncomfortable nature of breathing mm-hmm. together and doing things that are really outside the scope of what you would ever do on a day-to-day basis, and it just cracks open the vulnerability. So we did that, and
it was remarkable.
And then she also led us.
I'm curious what she would do with people that were not already as connected as we were.
Same. No, she does. Yeah. She does them all the time, and so it was really cool. So she'll be doing a little bit of tantra work with the self. So just intimate breath work and consciousness, we're working on in this retreat in November 2nd through the 9th. We're going to be down in Quimixto, Mexico, at Mixto Resort. This is Wake Wellness's Rebirth Retreat. You can find it on our website. We'll connect in the show notes, and we've got 3 spots left. But it's going to be amazing. So essentially, you're unveiling this past version of yourself, right? So the you that's always been there is somewhere buried underneath society's pressure to make us change, survival patterns, all the things we do to arm ourselves with just a lot of armor as a way to protect ourselves so that we feel that we can navigate the world and be lovable and be accepted, because that's truly, I think, all of our desire. My goal with the retreat has always been to take your armor off, be in a safe space, even more than just taking your armor off. Maybe that would be your one layer. Not everybody gets to fully unzip. but at least internally with your own self, that you will have the space, the time, and we will give you the resources to go deep inside of yourself to the you that existed before the world told you who you were supposed to be, before the world gave you cues that you needed to change who you were to be lovable. And you're going to tap into what I call the essential self, the deepest part of who you are, and connect with that part of you. And when you connect with that part of you, you may look at your life and your patterns and some of the things that you're doing and say, yeah, man, these helped me when I was younger to like maybe get out of this situation where I didn't feel lovable, but now they're blocking me from living my authentic life and the life that would make me happy. It's why I feel disconnected. It's why I feel angry. It's why I feel all of these anxieties, and I'm not sleeping, and my body feels aches and pains, and I just don't feel good. And I don't want to do this anymore. And so we teach you how to go inside and truly learn to trust yourself, as same as in our grief journey. We have a lot of people that come from grief. And you learn to trust and love yourself. And even just in small ways. And we will teach you how to build upon that need to tap into that person that's inside. Dismantle the reasons we went to that place to hide. And then maybe teach you how to go home. Well, definitely to teach you how to go home and stay connecting with that true self. And then dismantling these parts of your life that aren't serving you anymore, that are actually making you miserable, because you get one life. And you know that David and I are, that's the pulpit we stand from, is you get one run on this planet. How are you going to live your life? And so we're super excited. It's going to be an amazing event. We've got all kinds of amazing stuff. Binaural beats. We're doing this cool, difficult connecting with the self, dancing, the raw parts of play that we don't do as adults, the parts that are hard, trying to find fun. And it's going to be amazing.
Yeah.
And so, David gave you the man version of it, but after he went to that retreat, he did a 10 mezcal, which is what some people might know as Indians refer to it as a sweat lodge. And this is the Mayan culture and Aztec cultures in this area. And so it's called a 10 mezcal, and it's a heated sweat lodge, and they go through the 4 doors of death, and it's really beautiful. And I think after you did that, you let go of a lot of things, huh?
Yeah, it was very powerful. Very different than what I was expecting to.
Yeah. So lots of ceremonies like that. So we got some questions this week. Are we spiritual? You're damn right we're spiritual. But is it religious? No, it's not religious. You don't have to be religious. When we refer to spirituality, we refer to getting connected with the deepest part of yourself. So some people might call that the divinity within. It's just your true self. So no need to be religious. So we hope that we will see you guys all there, and we hope that today we got a little more clarity on why we've been absentee for a little bit.
Yeah.
It's going to be a little touch and go for a minute as we are counting down any minute till this baby arrives. And just to let you know, she's healthy as a clam and now going to be here and most likely not have a NICU stay and be healthy. And we didn't have those kind of thoughts before we did that scary procedure. So we're really blessed and lucky, and
we're very grateful
for our team and for our health, and
very grateful and very hopeful.
Yeah, it's going to be good. So thank you so much. We hope to see you back next week. We're going to be kind of touch and go week to week, but we're going to be here as much as we can. And when we're not here, it's because we're going to have a brand new baby in our arms, and we're going to take every moment to be mindful and love on that baby as much as we can.
Yep.
So we hope to see you guys back soon, and we'll be touching base soon. Thanks so much for joining us today.
This has been Wake the F Up podcast, hosted by Alix and David Long. Be sure to check out other episodes where our community of experts share tools and ideas to help you wake to the life inside of you. If you enjoyed this episode of Wake the F Up, please like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Join the Wake community by downloading our app. Just search for The Wake Wellness in the Apple or Android App Store, and follow us on Instagram at The Wake Wellness. Thanks for listening.